Begin the meeting of the planning board for April 8th at 6:30 PM. I have an announcement to make first about to open meeting recordings. Any person may make a video or audio recording of an open meeting or may transmit that meeting through any medium, subject to reasonable requirements of the chair as to the number, placement, and operation of equipment used so as not to interfere with the conduct of the meeting. Any person intending to make such a recording shall notify the chair forthwith. All documents referenced or used during the meeting must be submitted in duplicate to the Director of Community Development and Planning, person to the Open Meeting and Public Records Law. All documents shall become part of the official record of the meeting. Is there anyone here, obviously other than the city recorder? I see or hear no one, so we'll move on. We begin a definitive site plan for the city of Gardner with Stephen Sine. You make a presentation.
How you doing, guys? I'm Stephen Sene, and Greg Roy is the engineer on the project, and he'll walk you through it.
Okay.
And I'm more than happy to answer any questions that want to be directed towards me, but I'll let him handle the technical side of it first, and we'll go from there.
All right, thank you.
Thanks, Steve. Thanks very much, folks. My name's Greg Roy with Dilson Roy Civil Design Group. Some familiar faces here, but I haven't had the pleasure of coming before you tonight, which is hard to believe because I've been around a while, but it's nice to see you all and be acquainted. And as Steve said, Steve retained us to prepare the site plan for the project, as well as to prepare the filings with both your board, and I wanted to just put it in context with the larger permitting effort. We have also concurrently filed a special permit application with the Zoning Board of Appeals, which is on their agenda for next week. What we're proposing here is 6 units on the property at 0 Emerald Street. Which is allowed by special permit from the Zoning Board of Appeals, which is why we've of course filed jointly, and also requires site plan approval with your board. So effectively, the site is approximately just over 21 or 22,000 square feet in size, so it's a fairly small piece of property. We're proposing to ultimately subdivide the property into 2 parcels. Once we get through the process with you, and assuming we have a favorable outcome both with your board and the Zoning Board of Appeals, we would come back to your board with an A&R plan to do that subdivision. But we didn't want to put the cart before the horse relative to that. So we're proposing a 3-unit building on each lot. The access to Emerald Street would be sort of a conventionally designed driveway system with direct access for a garage for each of the units. So we're effectively providing two parking spaces per unit. One would be an exterior space in front of each garage, and of course 1 space within each of the garage units. We've also designed a stormwater system for the project. I know Rob may have had the opportunity to review that, may have some insight into that, but effectively we're capturing all of the runoff from the proposed impervious portions of the site. It's a vacant site now, so it's a site of, with some slope to it as you come from Emerald Street down to the Timpani Boulevard in the back. So there's quite a slope there, but there's no impervious cover existing. So all of the roofs, all the driveways we'll be adding will be new. So we proposed to capture that in a storm drain system. We'll capture the roof areas as well as some field inlets here, which will capture the runoff from the driveways and infiltrate them down into a underground storm drainage system that we have designed on the lower portion of the site. I don't want to say too much. We're going to take advantage of the grade. We're proposing a walkout on the low side, so we can take advantage of the of the site grading. There is quite a bit of grading that needs to occur on the property. So, this site plan that you have in front of you is the grading and drainage plan that we prepared. We're proposing a retaining wall to catch the lower portion of the site, which will need to make sure we can keep that grading on the property. Other than that, I wanted to keep it pretty brief by way of my introductory comments, and I'm happy to take any questions from any of you folks or anybody else that's in the meeting for that matter. So, thank you.
What is the elevation from the proposed houses to Emerald Street itself?
Thank you. Great. So we're proposing, actually, we're setting those up a little bit higher than the street, so the driveway would effectively pitch back towards Emerald Street. So top of foundations on this three-plex here would be 1,027, almost 1,028, and the existing grades down here are roughly 1,026 or 1,027. So we'll put a little bit of a pitch there. Same thing on this building.
When I first heard the presentation, I don't know if it was for the development review or not, I don't remember.
Yeah.
There was a question about having 6 driveway access to the edge of the road. How is that gonna be cleared? I know Rob, you had a question about that.
If I may,
Sure.
zoning for residential uses allows a single access driveway. It's in my comments.
Okay.
I also commented to ZBA, this has happened on other projects for this kind of project. So you probably have to deal with them on that issue.
Okay.
Brought it out, I believe that came up at development review as well, because.
Yeah, we
just because
did,
of the
that's what I
style.
remember.
Yeah, just because knowing that's how this would want, to have driveways. So that's all, and I noted the zoning section in my comments.
Okay.
Okay.
Does anyone else have any questions?
Got a couple questions about the stormwater management. Have you done test pits to confirm adequate separation to groundwater and bedrock at the infiltration
We have
unit?
not. We have not done that, to be fair, so.
And as far as the operation and maintenance of that system, is that gonna be like shared among an HOA, or how's that gonna be assigned?
Yeah, well, so we did submit, I believe, anyway, a stormwater report with this, which does include stormwater O&M. I would, since it is a shared system, I would anticipate, yes, a shared agreement that would be in place there. Totally private, though. We're not, all of this would be intended to be on the lots, not impacting the city, not on the city to operate and maintain it, so.
Yeah, I was mainly asking just because when you separate the lots, I don't know. If
Yeah, I
end up
think we
with
need-
one of the properties or the other.
Yeah, I think we need a shared agreement, because the run-up from here would be discharged on that property, so we're definitely going to put some easements and agreements in place.
For clarity too, typically on smaller projects like this for us, we will tie the O&M to either to an HOA or to the association, so that it is tied by deed
Right.
to that.
Okay.
So there's nobody can say in 10 years, we didn't know about that.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank
For
you.
exactly your point.
So this project's gonna be condos,
So there'll be,
sold or rented?
so myself, we sometimes will hold property,
Yeah,
sometimes we'll sell it. It really depends on the market that we're in.
yeah,
Right now, the market's decent, things change. So, our intent is to build everything we start, we finish, we build them, we get them to occupancy, and then from that point in time, if we sold them, they would be sold as individual units and not as a rental property, would not be sold as a 3-family,
okay.
for rent to an investor.
Okay, so it'll be condos, so far.
Right, yes.
Thank you.
For the use on the property, like historically, is there anything that would need to be kind of vetted for any kind of testing for previous use? I don't know if it was
It's all woods.
all woods, always was.
As
Yeah, I don't know.
long as I can remember, it's
Yeah.
all woods.
No,
No?
No previous use, yeah. Okay. It's just been
no,
vacant.
no, I'm not saying it's no previous use.
Oh.
No, there
Oh.
was a previous
Oh.
use, yes. I've lived in that little square underneath your right hand.
This
My
one?
family's been in that house for 100 years, and I've lived there for close to 71 now.
That's right.
So that property was a foundry,
Ah.
and in the 1960s, it burned to the ground. So that was a foundry, and it did, I don't know if it produced metal parts. It did work along with the furniture factories in Gardner, but it was a metal foundry.
Well, that definitely predates me. That definitely
Yeah.
predates me. But thank you
They
for that.
ever test the soil in there for what could be left from the foundry?
We have not done any soil testing that I know of.
No, nothing's been done.
So the cars that
Right to
will be
the-
parking in there,
8 feet or
they'll
against.
go out onto Emerald Street?
We'll just
Correct,
continue
yeah.
into the
Except that's correct,
This one.
right, yeah.
I do.
I have a question
Speaking
about your
for
grading. You're bringing that entirely
her.
up
No.
with the level of the railroad tracks?
With the level of emerald, yeah, so the top of foundations would be somewhere close to the level of
And
emerald.
that dark green area around the edge is not being brought up, so
That's correct, that's off,
behind our home then will be a pool.
well, it drains from here to there, so,
Yeah.
Yeah, but you're, right, but,
right.
okay, so
It doesn't-
behind our house then, that's already low-lying will be a catch basin for whatever water comes off your property up.
Well, we're-
Because that's down low below the railroad tracks.
Correct, so I mean, to be clear, it runs there now, right? That's the way it drains now,
Yeah.
and that's the way it'll drain afterwards.
I'm talking about the other end of that.
Right, so we have a swale, so we do have grading here, we have a swale that we're picking up here so as not to drain it that way, right? But we're, like I said before, that's the purpose of the stormwater system we designed, is to ensure that we're capturing all of the runoff from the new impervious areas that really are gonna generate the additional runoff. And get them down here so that we can infiltrate that and manage the stormwater on site. So, we did design a system to take care of that.
On your property.
Correct.
It's not gonna be draining onto Tiffany Boulevard.
Correct.
Could you state your name?
Phyllis Sanders Awitz?
You did the speaking.
Both of us,
Okay.
Kathleen Galant,
Kathleen, and your address?
87 Emerald Street.
We're
Okay.
right across the street from
And those.
the other side.
Oh, yeah.
We're
And
right
I,
across the street,
we're
right?
abutters at 100.
Your name?
Phyllis Sanders Awitz.
Thank you. Just want to get that on record, that's all. Any other questions?
Couple on erosion control during construction. I didn't see an erosion control plan sheet. Would the plan be to do silt fence and wattle around
Yes, it would.
the entire down gradient side?
Absolutely, yeah. And if it's not on the plan, that's on us, so that's certainly yes.
And like extremely nitpicky comment, but it looks like on the silt fence, like plan detail, that the straw wattle is on the down gradient end away from the disturbed side of the site.
Yeah, you know, we get that comment from time to time. I find it's better personally, as I've been doing this, to put the silt fence on the upgradient inside from an operation and maintenance standpoint. It's just easier to clean it when you have sediment. So we use the straw to support and we find it works well. We do get boards and certainly in some conservation commissions that we know of that really don't agree with that approach and like to have it sort of more conventional way. So we're indifferent to that. If the city of Gardner would rather have it on the upgraded side, we don't have a problem with changing that. But that is intentional. It's sort of a Greg Roy thing. And not everybody likes it, but.
So, if you decide to keep them as apartments or condos, whichever you wanna call them, who's gonna maintain those?
So there would be an association, and it would be a managed association.
Okay, because there's a lot of properties in the general area that
Fully.
they say they're gonna take care of them, and then all of a sudden, you know, it's let go.
There's a mattress on that property, right there on the right. A mattress.
So mattresses will not be allowed.
Outside,
Thank you.
Well, that is one of the advantages of developing a piece of property like that, is you tend to clean up some of that.
Gonna close it.
You know, some of those
I think the little trailer that's there,
Open.
that'll go too. The little travel trailer that's there.
Yeah, it's been there
That's
for
the-
20, it hasn't moved in over 20 years.
There's
So all
a
that stuff.
tree that's
Okay.
going, growing up through it.
Sorry.
Anything else?
I guess one of the questions I have is the on-street parking. Emerald Street's a one-way street. And the whole street's covered in the morning. When I leave at 5:30 in the morning, you can barely get up the street because there's no sidewalk anymore. They raised the road so high that there's no sidewalk. People are parking where people try to walk. If there's no parking in that stretch, I don't know, you said you had 2 per, if somebody has a guest, where do they park? And if it's parking lot,
No, your
Well-
house.
out in front of our house.
Some of these actually, truthfully, which I can't read upside down, but these driveways would actually accommodate 3 vehicles off-street parking. This one really would accommodate 3 as well, because the distance between the edge of the pavement and down here is, approximately 35 feet. So you can really get a couple cars in there, and you have the garage, so you really,
And to do with that also, what about snow removal in the winter? It doesn't seem like there's much space to put it. Right now, that area, the plows plow that
Plow.
entire area
yeah,
in.
right in there, yeah. Well, I think we'd be utilizing the green spaces,
Yeah, okay.
off to the edge of the driveways. It's a straight push in, so it's probably, if it's a property management company, if it's an apartment, ends up being apartments like Steve mentioned with a property management company, I could see that it'd be plowed. If it's a condo, ends up being sold as condos, I could see that it's probably a candidate for a snow blower, right? Because it's plowing it straight in like that is kind of a pain, especially with the winter we had with all the sticky, icy, But, we'd be utilizing that green space for the snow storage.
I guess my biggest concern on that street itself is the street's not maintained now. There's so many potholes on that street, and there's so much parking that a fire truck would have trouble up the street a little ways, making it through, going towards the bottom of Wright Street, Stash of Calluses to Main Street. It's so narrow, the cars all park on the sidewalk now. It's just a very dangerous street, people walking, kids going to school. It's just got too much traffic. I guess that's one of my
Yes, sir.
biggest fears.
So to maybe try to help out with a couple of those things for you. So I do believe that there is sidewalk on
There is.
on one side of the property. So it is our intention to continue that sidewalk, at least an asphalt sidewalk.
Yes.
Along
It used to
the
be
front of our
It used to be
property.
a curb sidewalk of cement until they raised the road so high that,
Oh, they buried the curb.
So as far as the sidewalk goes, that's something that definitely, we were, anticipating having to do on this one. When I first looked at it, I kind of thought there weren't sidewalks out there, then I drove back out after the first meeting and I was like, there's sidewalks there, so we'll continue those.
we've had people parking in front of our house, in front of our door, so we couldn't even get access outside. And the police wouldn't tag them because they said there isn't a sidewalk there. It's asphalt from the road evenly with the sidewalk. So, I
Because
mean,
they paved the curb reveal over time, so now it's.
if there's, need a curb there to make it a sidewalk.
And then to the second point about additional parking, and I think maybe it would be the right place to bring it up in the ZBA meeting. If they were amenable to having an additional parking spot,
Spotted to, yeah.
I would be more than happy to do additional spots,
Yeah.
on that for more additional off-street parking.
For residents who are residents on Emerald Street but don't belong to you?
No, for the owners of the units.
But that entire stretch is gonna be lost to off-street parking for
Which
residents
is
who live
used
there
now,
now.
every day.
That entire 180-foot stretch is covered every day. At all times.
You don't see it during the day.
All
Go
day.
through there at night, after people are, 5:30 in the morning when I leave, his car's parked all along the road. And they're all parked on the sidewalk because the road's so narrow.
I'll try to solve the problems I can
That's-
solve.
I know,
If I can, whatever I can do.
it's just,
That's the people that park on that side of the street, that's their problem.
But there's only one side to park on.
They
That's
tried
it.
to build down there one other time, I don't remember how long ago it was, and they denied it, but we can't find why it was denied the last time. What the reasons were. We tried to look it up, but it's hidden.
There was something about, not, not digging down? I can't remember.
Fill it in, if he's gonna fill it.
Okay.
We're gonna lose an entire green space. There's railroad tracks, a Hannaford loading dock, Hannaford parking lot, no, over on your left-hand side. Hannaford loading dock, Hannaford parking lot, ramp that goes up between Hannaford and an auto mechanic. Route 68 is right below that. An underpass is at that dark curvy corner. Up above the underpass, possibly idling trains, definitely moving trains. There's Route 2, an elevated section of Route 2 that you can hear both ends of for about half a mile in west and east. And what else am I forgetting? And Emerald Street itself. And that curve where my house is, the fire department practices taking that curve for new firemen. It's impossible.
And
And you're building about 20 feet from the corner of my house.
And I've had 2 of my cars hit and run parking in front of my house, so I can't park in front of my house. Other people will, but they'll park up top, so I can't even reach my house.
Yeah, that, just to be clear, that dimension there is
12 feet.
35 feet to our prop, to
To the
our,
corner, up to the top corner.
from that corner of the building to
No,
our,
no, the top corner of the driveway.
here?
Yeah, over to the corner of my house is about 20 feet. No,
Your house is this,
Driveways are about
Oh.
20 feet, 12 feet across.
okay, I thought you were talking about the building.
And there's a stone wall that's there, it's a foundational wall, and you're gonna not
And the
fill all the
stairs.
way.
We're not touching that, yeah, this
Yep,
green
so
space we would not be
That's a real
touching.
problem. That's a real problem for us.
It's a problem for not touching the wall that's there?
Yeah,
Why is that?
if it's left, it's gonna be below you. That water will infiltrate my cellar.
Okay. There's nothing else, we'll close this meeting. We don't have any questions.
Did you say, sir, that I needed to submit duplicate copies of my list of
If
concerns?
you record it.
I don't know if,
Oh, okay,
I'm sorry, I'm not aware of.
we'll do that, all right. Thank you. I have nothing else, we have nothing else. This meeting's closed, not
Okay,
ended,
Make a
closed.
motion to close.
All right, thank you for the reminder. Motion to
Make a
close
motion,
meeting.
we close the
Paul makes
public hearing.
second.
Can I just ask a clarifying question here before?
Go ahead.
So if we're closing the public hearing, that means we're not discussing or continuing it to a future meeting. We're closing this and then voting on it
No,
later,
we're
is that
not.
correct?
We're not ending the meeting, we're just closing it. It's a word on terminology.
I think if I can clarify, you want to leave the hearing open.
Yes, the hearing is still open.
Right, so you can still take new
So we're
revisions
suspending the
and-
meeting.
Yes.
That's the word, I'm
You're going to
sorry.
want to submit responses
Yeah, yeah,
and
so-
address my comments, and
yeah, I did not see copies of those, I don't know if we were supposed to get those or
it
not.
went out yesterday.
Oh, okay.
Just
Did they come to us?
I did not send it to Jason, sorry.
Oh,
I did copy him.
all right, well, it's not like we would have probably been able to address them in a 24-hour period.
Probably not.
But no, I think, from the sounds of it, you want to continue the meeting to the next, so we give us some time to
Yes,
digest and respond to the things.
that's
we heard
right,
this
we're
evening.
just suspending it.
Yeah, okay.
So would it would be a motion to continue the public hearing to the next meeting rather than to
Yes.
close it?
Nice catch.
So
Yes.
moved.
Motion to
Amend your,
suspend the meeting until the next meeting.
That's correct, use,
Paul, oh, Eric, and then you
Yes.
second. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
The next one is definitive site plan. West Mini Storage off of Maker Drive.
Good evening.
Good evening.
So, for the record, Justin LeClaire, Mechanical Engineering. Also with me is Mr. Al Belandra of West Main Storage. So, last time we were in front of the board, we presented this plan, self-storage, unit shown here in the brown, access way shown here, site to be secured, fenced in. We went over the plan, we received the initial comment letter from Mr. Rob Alva. We went through that, we did submit a revised set plan, strange calcs accordingly to the city for review. We did get a response letter from Mr. Alva. I would like to just go through it, talk through the points.
Yes, please.
So the first one states the plans include the phase of the project as depicted on sheet 2, which was added to the plan set from the last meeting. So this is what the board had seen and we had discussed. So your phase 1 is here, everything down the front. Phase 2 would be your middle piece. We were having discussions on part of the at-grade base would have to be constructed as part of phase 2. And then the darkest gray shown here in the back would be phase 3, and that would be the final build out. So, from his comment, will the project meet the water quality, volume, and recharge standards if the project is not fully built out? For example, if phase 3 isn't completed and the first 2 phases are done, is there enough in the 2 at-grade basins to meet all stormwater regs? I did look at it. We blow everything out of the water. Just for clarification for the board, the total recharge volume that is required for the full build out is 0.048 acre feet. We have 0.141 between the 2 at-grade basins. So even between the 2 at-grade basins, we have more than enough for the entire project. The second comment was pertaining to the soil testing. We did provide where we did some of the testing as part of the initial design. We did do testing down here. As previously discussed, when we initially looked at this, we wanted to do pods with infiltration underneath. That's why we did the testing where we showed it. We did not end up testing over here and over here. Due to the change of the design, we did have to increase the size of this basin and add this one. I did speak to Mr. Oliver today regarding that, and during the discussion we could talk about it, but we would be amenable to conditioning that testing be conducted in these 2 basins prior to the start of construction, and we can verify depth groundwater material. We did poke really the majority of the site, the material was consistent, so I would expect that testing here and here would give us the same results as what we found across the site. Third comment pertains to the electrical service. If the board recalls, everything's going to be solar powered, but we do have gates here and here that would have keypads that the client would enter their number into the keypad, the gate would open, they'd be able to enter. The idea is that there are solar mounted keypads that can be bought and installed. It'd be the owner's intention to install those for the gates. And then the last comment pertains to the stormwater permit under the stormwater management ordinance. I know this is new in the city. We did speak regarding how to go about this, and as his comment states, we'll request a permit from him. We'll submit a letter stating that we're looking for a stormwater permit for the plans here. Other than that, I think everything else was satisfactorily addressed in the comments. We did receive a letter from the police chief and the deputy chief saying they had no issues with this. I did reach out to fire. I reached out to Mr. Patez to review the plans to make sure he had no issues he had them, I never heard from him, so I would anticipate that fire, if they had major issue with the project, would have reached out, email, phone call, something, or would have reached out to the director and said, hey, these are my comments. So, other than that, if the board has any additional questions based on the revised material, I'll be happy to answer.
Are you saying the gates?
Yep.
Run by electricity, the solar panels will provide enough power to run the gates as well?
Yes, I believe Mr. Belanger has.
We believe so. We're doing my first one now in Westminster, so I'll let you know. If not, we'll have to bring the service in.
Yeah, so an alternative is in the event that these don't work at our site and we have to do real power here, there are utility poles. Actually, this pole shows it better. There are utility poles on our side of the street that we could tie into, so
Yeah, there are.
realistically, it would be a riser from the poles, run the power onto the site, and then from there disperse it to the gates as needed. If we can get away with the solar power, then we won't have to worry about that.
And the solar panels are going to be on the top of the buildings as you build them, or are they gonna be separate? Separate field of
The
panels?
ones we're doing now, they have panels for the gate. I'm a little apprehensive, so I have a pod right next to my other gate, so I'm putting some more panels on the top. I'm not gonna get caught short, people calling, can't get in, can't get in. So we're gonna make sure there's more power, we're gonna put some batteries in there, and we should be okay.
So there won't be a separate solar field to generate the power for the site. If that's where you're kind
Yeah,
of
that's what I'm
going.
confident.
Yeah, there's not gonna be, point conversation, there's not gonna be a giant solar field over here that's gonna be used to power. Everything will be done, I would expect these couple units, you'd put it near it.
There's a lifting mechanism, it's almost like a small transformer pad, and it's got a space on the bottom for the batteries, and you put a small panel on the fence, that's all it's requiring. Again, I'm putting a little bit more just to make sure we're good, but
And then as you build the buildings and then add the light packs, you just extend the electrical system.
the lights themselves,
Have solar?
they're solar lights, and the
Okay.
panel is on the light itself.
Okay.
So we have to run nothing for that. I don't envision more than maybe 2 or 3 panels on one of the buildings for the gates. It's not a lot of solar. It's not like we're covering the whole roof.
Okay.
Yeah, and these aren't giant, like Mr. Belanger said, these aren't giant panels that are gonna go on, it's just smaller
You
ones.
probably won't even notice them.
Probably the size of the panel that run the stop sign lights here in Gardner.
Actually, that's a good
Seems-
comp, yes.
Okay. Okay. Anything else? Any other question?
Got a couple questions just related to the phasing. So phase one, it looks like you only have one entrance to the site. Would the plan be to operate with just one entrance and exit until phase two begins?
Yes, I would say this area here could potentially be incorporated if, depending on traffic, if there's any issues, we could add the second site to it. Realistically, as part of this phase one, you're gonna operate out of the one entrance. If we get to the point where there's an extensive amount of traffic, it's probably time to do phase two, and you're gonna have enough traffic and these units will be maxed out, so you'll have to do phase two, and then the second entrance would go in.
We would probably do a turnaround, a dirt turnaround, so that people can actually turn. If a fire truck came in, they could actually make a turn and go back out. They won't have to back out.
Yeah, or some sort of, whether it's a cul-de-sac turnaround, T turnaround, something like that, just to be able to get them back out.
And then as far as erosion controls during construction for the phased approach, would you be amenable to like just doing sections at a time rather than setting up a silt fence around the entire site that you might not
Yeah.
develop for
Yes.
years?
Yeah, so realistically, we want to do the whole thing. That's why I showed the entire limits of the erosion control. During phase one, we would install the construction entrance, we'd run the erosion control all the way back here and bring it somewhere around the back, this way up to the road. And then, again, phase two, if we're only doing phase two, we'd come around the basin, maybe come back up a little bit, follow the line here between phase two and phase three. So yes, it would be incrementally established.
And then my last question on the phasing is just similar to the water quality question, would peak rates and required recharge volume similarly be met if you were to phase it
Yeah.
and stop at a certain phase?
Yeah, these are, so the way that this is phased out is this area grades down, comes back to this basin, this phase two goes to this basin, this phase three is underground, and each basin is sized to mitigate the pre-post.
So for the privacy fencing, that I'm just thinking of phase one being complete, and the privacy fencing would just cut off at the edge of phase one, or would that?
So I would imagine that the fence out on the edge will be installed.
Yep.
And assuming that it's temporary and we're just stopping phase one while we wait for phase two, there would be some sort of temporary fence. Same thing, come back with the limit of work as part of phase one.
Still around the
Still
the
around.
dirt turnaround for any
Yes.
EMS vehicles
Yep.
that need to be on site, and then that would just be removed once the fencing would be completed surrounding the rest of the facility as
Yes.
Yeah, I have a
That's
couple
completed.
truckloads of that temp fencing, so we
Yeah.
got plenty of it.
okay.
Yep. And same thing.
And then same thing with phase two,
Phase
once
two,
that's
yep.
temporary fencing.
Build it out, get
Okay.
established, temporary fencing. If for whatever reason Mr. Belanger decides that we're not gonna do phase three and we're just done at two, we could swap out the temp fence for permanent,
Okay.
permanent security fencing.
So your expansion depends on how fast the rentals go.
So if you do stop at only two phases, I think it would be appropriate for us to have like two sets of plans of if you were needed to stop at phase two, depending on interest, just so we would have an idea of,
Revise the plan.
yeah,
Yeah, and we could show, okay, this is the revised grading at the end of, assuming we get to two phases, right?
yeah,
We'll show that, okay, as part of this, now we're gonna pull all this grading back, the fence is gonna become permanent here, wrap around the basin. We could submit,
just as a contingency for us.
yes,
In the case where there's not enough interest in, that would warrant a
I don't
phase
think
three.
we'll stop phase two, but if we stop phase two, we'll go into three.
Okay,
I mean, it's just, we're gonna be a third of the way there.
yeah,
There's enough energy for phase two.
okay,
I mean, Q-Smart, they got 1,000 units, they're 93%
yeah,
full. So
yeah.
There's a demand, there's a need.
Did you say you don't think there will be a phase two?
No, I'm saying, if we go into phase two, the phase three will
Okay.
absolutely happen.
Gotcha.
I think just for the point of conversation, it's just easy to say, we're not talking, if
Don't-
this
we
never
don't have
happens.
much
That's where the profit
Yeah,
is. in the last phase.
exactly.
The only thing I'd see is the phase two where it's gonna end, and the idea of going in through the first gate and dead ending without putting the turnaround. If you're gonna put a turnaround in, why not put in the second gate and make it one loop? Cost, I'm sure, but
We can do that.
We could do that, we would, so, at that point, we could look at, and the reason I did not show it is, once you get into this area here, this point is all graded to come back and be caught into the structures. This is only a little bit of pavement, so we could probably find a solution to mitigate that impervious. But that's why the phase one, phase two line is drawn as is, because in the final condition of that phase two, once you're here, this all comes back, which then would mean that this space would have to get built. And it doesn't make sense to build this entire basin if you're only doing 20 feet.
Yes.
The drive aisle. But we could look at options to get that water directed somewhere else while phase 2 is on call standby.
We could put a temporary basin there to catch the water.
Yeah, yep.
When we do phase 2 though, we're gonna wanna use that second entrance as a construction entrance to
Yep.
keep all of my pedestrians away from that. So that temp fence, again, I think my temporary cul-de-sac is gonna come in handy. That's what we're thinking. I mean, we'll open up the other side temporarily, and when we come to build, I'd like to somehow keep the construction entrance away from the finished product.
Makes sense.
Yeah, and if, just for the board's knowledge, yes, I do show the stockpile construction area, staging area here. Obviously, that would move as the site is developed. Accordingly, it would be encased straw bale silt fence, same as you typically do with stockpiles of material, things like that. It was just to graphically give the board an idea of how we would stage everything.
Yeah, go ahead.
Just to reiterate, there's not gonna be any outside storage of vehicles, campers.
No
I
mattresses.
have no extra parking there for that. It would be nice, but it's not there. Nothing on the roofs, nothing. It's clean.
I believe you had asked at the last meeting regarding stabilization of
I did.
slopes. Okay, so I did put the note that our landscape architect gave. I'm assuming you looked at
I
it?
did see it, yep.
Okay. Satisfactory?
Yeah, all good. I looked at the spec sheet too for the
Okay.
tactifier and the seed mix that you were talking
Yeah.
about.
Yeah, and that's, like I said at the last meeting, that was something that we were recommended to start using, and we find this to work just as well, if not better.
Yeah.
So we've been speccing it.
I've just seen blowouts on 2-to-1 slopes with hydroseed
Yep.
alone, but I could
Yep.
I can see that there's clearly like a stronger.
Yep, we've seen it too, and we've
Yeah.
had to tell certain contractors, what are you doing?
Did he answer all your questions, Bob?
Yeah, the few that I had remaining after the revisions, you know, I'm fairly satisfied with. A condition upon additional soil testing being performed is important. Typically, I hesitate to do that because I like to see that information now. All I can say is it's at their risk if there's a change in the design due to soil conditions, groundwater elevations. They're gonna have to come back in because it's probably gonna change their design. So again, I recommend that it get done really early prior to construction so that you know, things don't grind to a halt because of it. So when that's done, that, you know, of course it has to get submitted and we'll take a look at it again. But that's what we talked about. So it's their risk, not yours.
And we're okay with that risk. I'll let Rob know when we're doing testing so he can be out there, he can see it. Like he said, in the worst case that it's something completely different than what we expected and it does change the design of the site, obviously we would resubmit the revised plan to come in for a modification to site plan approval and note the changes and why.
Okay. I just want to confer with you. I think we ought to suspend this one too. Wait until the testing is done. And we get the report of the testing and we can bring it back and then make an approval of that. That sound logical?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, we'll just wait until after the testing results. And then we'll make probably a final decision after the testing.
My memory tells me that on the right side, and I'll confer with Brian, but we tested on the right side. I was the guy doing the grading. I don't know why it's not on the plan. there was testing done on the right side. He told me that he didn't have any over there. I did the digging. So we'll have to just go through Brian's notes.
Yeah,
And add it, that's all.
we can confirm if we need to go out, we'll definitely go out.
Yeah.
I think that's amenable. I would ask, would it be possible for the board to have a draft approval for the next meeting? Because I would assume we can get out there ASAP.
Well, I'm in the middle of doing something, so I can't just drop what I'm doing. I gotta just finish what I'm doing, then I can go over and punch some more holes.
But
It's just on the right side we're gonna do it?
so the right side here, and then the space in here. So maybe a half day, if that, just to drive around,
It's not a half a day, it's a whole day.
or a whole day. But I would ask if we could have a set of draft conditions
Mhm.
for the next
Conditions.
meeting.
Could we add conditions
Oh,
onto it?
yeah.
Or should we do that beforehand? Make sure that's on there.
Add conditions to testing approvals. That's
Yep.
one of them they're done.
Well, so if the board wants us to do testing before the next meeting, I would say that condition wouldn't have to be on the approval. Or if the board's okay with conditioning the testing, then I would ask to just make a decision tonight. Again, I don't see an issue with continuing once if the board's that adamant about seeing the testing. I would just ask that when we come for the next meeting, that here's your testing, this is the change that we made, or,
Let's just go do the testing and
okay,
we'll take it from there.
Okay,
but seems fair if we could have a draft, just
We can have a draft approval
perfect.
prepared.
Just to help,
Condition, that's all.
Yeah,
yeah, with conditions, and if there's anything, yeah,
we'll have the approval drafted and any conditions needed.
Yeah.
Ready for the next meeting,
yeah. that-
so.
When's the next meeting?
December.
March?
May 11th.
I'm sorry, sorry,
May,
May 13th.
May 13th.
May 13th?
Gives us, yeah.
Yeah, it's plenty of time to get out there,
It's a
so.
month.
I'm on your side.
motion to suspend this meeting until the next meeting and after the testing results.
Second that. Well, you can't do it. I make a motion that we go to the next meeting, which will be on May 13th.
Second.
All in favor?
Right.
Aye. Okay,
All right, thank you.
thank you. Finally clear.
So for the third item, due to conflict with the solicitor for the zoning amendment,
Yeah,
we're gonna have to open the meeting and then make a motion to
oh, that's the one you talked about,
reschedule
next meeting.
for April 16th at 6:30, or we'll continue then.
Okay, I open the next, item 11-506, open the next meeting concerning a zoning ordinance on chapter 675 submitted by Cheer City Church. And because we haven't got an opinion from the city solicitor, we'll suspend this meeting until the next scheduled meeting in May. A motion to approve.
No, it's, so the solicitor for this zoning amendment specifically,
Yeah.
the city solicitor is here with us. This is Solicitor Christine Tree,
Oh,
and then we'll
okay.
make a motion to reschedule this public hearing for April 16th at 6:30.
Okay.
To continue the public hearing then.
Motion to continue the public hearing to April 16th at 6:30 PM.
The hearing's opened, and then continued.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Open to continue.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And nothing else, a motion, nothing?
Oh, we'll continue on to the regular meeting and just.
Oh, yeah.
open. So we'll make a motion first to, well, this is now wrapped with the public meeting, so
Public
we'll
meeting's
make a
closed.
motion to open the regular meeting and then continue on from there.
Can you just take 1 second?
Sure.
Just introduce myself. I'm Attorney Vinnie Pusateri.
Oh,
I'm the city solicitor now for Gardner for a couple of months. And you guys don't give me any business, and I like it just like that. Just keep going the way you're going.
Could I have your name again, sir?
Vinnie Pusateri.
Bruce Terry.
Yeah.
Okay.
I did pick up actually, I think there was one appeal from the planning board that came in. There was a complaint filed by, so you did give me a little bit of business, but.
But try to keep it as minimal as possible. Try to keep it as minimal as
That's
possible.
fine. That's what I'm here for. If anyone has a question, they can certainly reach out through the director and reach me, for sure. All right, take care.
Thank you.
I'm so sorry. Take care.
Thanks, Benny.
Okay, we close the public hearings, open a regular meeting, approve of the, can I have a motion to approve the minutes of March 11th meeting?
Make a motion, we accept the minutes of the last meeting,
March 11th.
March 11th.
Second.
Second, okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Passed. Minutes are approved.
As we've already discussed on the public meetings for
Yeah.
the first three items, we can move on, and we've already made determinations on those three. We can move on to item 2.4, update to the floodplain overlay district ordinance.
Okay.
So if I may explain to the board what this is all about. So FEMA is issuing, they've been in a long process of updating the city's firm maps, well, most of central Massachusetts, I believe, including Worcester. As part of that, to keep our good standing with the National Flood Insurance Program, there's been a review of our floodplain overlay protection district ordinance to a couple of things, make sure it's consistent with the state's model bylaw for floodplain protection, in other general, I guess, review of it. So, starting way back this winter, I started working with DCR on an update to the ordinance. So it's a zoning ordinance. It has to go through the planning board before, as with any zoning change. Goes to the board first, then to city council, I believe. So as part of that, I've been working with DCR on an update to the ordinance. So what I provided to Director Stevens were two things. A red line version of the ordinance, basically with commentary from DCR, my responses, and the proposed changes. So you can see from the original ordinance, our existing ordinance, what's there, what's changing, what's being deleted, what's being just updated, and then a final draft of it, which is just a clean copy. So there aren't a lot of meat to the changes. The biggest thing in my eyes is basically we're replacing all of the definitions that we have in our zoning ordinance. And then there's a lot of bookkeeping issues with, address for the flood insurance program in Boston, among other things. But they're mostly small revisions, but again, they were pointed out by DCR to conform to the state model. Eric has looked at it. I know he emailed Jason and I with some comments. When I started looking at this, when the previous director, Jason's predecessor, and I started looking at it, the goal was to take our ordinance and just make it conform to the state model. I wasn't looking at potential changes to it. It wasn't changing the requirements of it. It's more just the language. Eric did have some good points that he made, which I think you guys should discuss, and maybe you should point them out.
Sure.
But other than that, that's what this is all about. And so right now, the new firm maps will be issued and made official July 8th. And as part of that, we have to have our ordinance updated for that date. So that's why we're talking about it now. Probably should have talked about it a little bit earlier, but here we are.
Yeah, I can talk a little bit about the comments that I had. And these mostly related to language in the existing ordinance, so it wasn't things that are proposed to be changed to bring the current ordinance into compliance with NFIP requirements. I think there's a bit of wording, particularly in the permitted use section, about what is and what isn't allowed within the floodplain. So I don't know how generally familiar you guys are with flood maps. For a long time, most of north central Massachusetts and western Massachusetts has not had digital flood maps. You have these old FEMA paper copies with, scales, large scales, and you gotta really overlay them. It's a pain to actually read them. But the digital maps are, a big upgrade because you can just type in an address on GIS and then see if it's in the floodplain or not. So with that, I think there's probably more attention to structures that are actually in the floodplain and do need to comply with these requirements. And I feel that some of the way that the ordinance is currently worded almost makes it seem like you couldn't use an existing structure in the floodplain unless you had a special permit, or if it fell under one of these very specific use categories like woodland, grassland, wetland. And I think clarifying that would be helpful because, if people have structures in the mapped floodplain, obviously they want to be able to use them and, replace their windows and stuff like that. And the way, I read some of these provisions made it seem like it would require a special permit from the planning board in order to make alterations to an existing structure in the floodplain, or new construction or any development really. So the NFIP requirement is that you have a permit for all development in the floodplain, and development is defined by the NFIP as basically, anything from constructing a building to paving to regrading to putting in a fence or a shed. And I think obviously some of those activities are minor enough that that's not something you want to have to come to planning board for a special permit for, right? We don't want to have to review every shed or fence or driveway resurfacing that happens in the floodplain. And so I think just the language around what is required in terms of permitting would be good to clarify. And it doesn't necessarily need to happen now because obviously this has been in the existing ordinance for a while. And right now we're just trying to get the mandatory changes through to make sure that the city's ordinance complies by that July deadline. But if not now, I think in the future it would be good to clarify some of these provisions. Having a special permit from planning board for renovations to an existing structure would just seem a little overly onerous. And so that requirement to have a permit for everything, most communities satisfy that by having a building permit or a conservation commission permit, because a building permit should cover everything that's interior to a house, right? Like window replacement, roof replacement, that kind of thing should be covered by a building permit. So that would be your permit in the floodplain. And any exterior stuff like regrading, paving, driveway replacement, that should be covered by a conservation commission permit under the Wetlands Protection Act because the floodplain is regulated under the Wetlands Protection Act. So I think there's just opportunity to clarify some of the permitting mechanisms that apply to these different types of development. But again, that's not necessarily something that we need to push heavily on now if the city just needs to get the current ordinance updated to incorporate the new maps in time for the effective date of the new firm.
I guess it's a silly question, but would this affect homeowners' insurance, or is this just?
So the ordinance itself shouldn't. The actual FEMA maps do. So when a structure is mapped within the 1% annual chance flood or the 100-year floodplain, any property that's financed through a federally backed mortgage is required to carry flood insurance. That's a mandatory purchase, called the mandatory purchase requirement, and that's at the federal level. So the map changes should, unless converting to digital maps makes it easier for lenders to figure out which structures are in the floodplain, there shouldn't be, people who are already in the floodplain who now have to pay flood insurance that they weren't expecting before. But if your structure, if the maps change and the extent of the floodplain is changing, which they are in some places, and your structure is not currently mapped in, but then the map extends to cover your structure, when those maps become effective, those people should be expecting letters from their lender saying you have to get mandatory flood insurance. So that's not an ordinance thing, it's a federal thing.
I can hear screaming.
I heard some already.
So I guess, what are you looking for us tonight then? As the planning board, are we looking for?
As the board, I believe at some point you have to take a vote on a proposed final ordinance before it goes to the council. And I believe, do you have a joint meeting
Yeah.
with the city council on the zoning change? What I would suggest is, prior to the next meeting, it gets on your agenda as a hearing item so that you can take a vote on it and move it forward to the council. So if there are changes you want to see made, I suggest you take a look at it. If you want to incorporate some of what Eric is talking about, I think we have time. If you wanted to, I'm more than happy to work with you on it. If the board's, if that's what.
I'd like that, yes.
If you
I
want.
could just take a red line draft of that Word document and send some suggested edits to Rob and Jason, and then maybe that could be incorporated into something for a future meeting that we
Next
could
meeting,
look
we
at
could vote on
and
it right away and get that off.
take a look at it then.
Should we, I had a thought as well, like, I was just reviewing, and due to the stricter criteria for some of the variances, non-financial hardship, no increased risk, things like that, like, should we provide some examples for guidance for typical cases where a variance might be granted with some of the new language?
I don't think that's really the function of
Okay.
the ordinance, because that's a case-by-case basis.
Gotcha.
When it's reviewed, or as they come in. But, we can certainly talk about, if you have other thoughts on variances in that section.
Variances from floodplain requirements and building code are pretty much never supposed to be issued.
Yeah. Okay.
So if I heard you correctly, you're saying that when the floodplain maps are revised and they're going to be digital, that doesn't matter. And if a current structure ends up to be on the edge of the floodplain, and if it happens to be mortgaged, then the lender of that structure, loan lender of that structure, requires the owners to buy flood insurance.
Correct.
So how will the lenders find out about these changes? Do they continually monitor the?
Mortgage.
I'm sure that they're aware that FEMA is updating the maps for their, where they have mortgages outstanding. So I wouldn't be surprised at all if we see properties that end up in the floodplain. I did a cursory review. It's the whole city, so it's difficult to pinpoint. I didn't see any egregious, expansion of the floodplain. But that's not to say, as Eric said, the old paper maps, it was almost impossible to accurately say. And you would get banks that would tell property owners they're in the floodplain, and they dispute it, and it was very difficult to do that with the digital maps. And there's even a tool in those maps where there's a slider where you can, on your screen, you can go from the old map to the new map, and so you can see visually now, you can kind of see where the changes happen. So, I would anticipate that some residents are going to get letters from their mortgage companies.
Obviously, we have no control over that anyway. So, once this has to be done, it has to be done. So,
Yeah.
Right.
So we have no control over that part.
Unfortunately not, but the calls will come in and I'll have to explain to people when that
We're on
happens.
TV now, so we have no control.
Yeah, no, and it's a really, it's too bad it happens, but it
Right.
will. I can't tell you the number, but I'm assuming, I mean, in the opposite, you may get some people who no longer qualify and can get rid of flood insurance.
It's true.
So there's some good with
So it
that.
can work both ways.
Yep.
Is this something that's gonna be state mandated by July?
Well, it's FEMA mandated,
For the state, FEMA for Worcester County?
No, no,
FEMA
federal.
for federal government.
FEMA.
If,
Yeah.
if you don't update your ordinance in time to incorporate the effective maps, your community is suspended from the National Flood Insurance Program, and you can't take out flood insurance policies through that anymore until you come back into compliance.
Damned if you do, damned if you don't. The other question I had was, you're saying that if a structure ends up in the floodplain and the homeowner or the owner of the structure wants to do some modifications to it, they have to make an application to the planning board for a special permit for anything.
That was how I interpreted the existing ordinance. Whether or not that's how it's been administered, I don't know. But that's how I read it, because it seems to me to basically say to construct a new structure or alter an existing structure, and there didn't seem to be any leniency. But it's also not super clear exactly what form of permitting is required. The language is a little inconsistent between provisions towards the back end of the ordinance.
There needs to be more clarification for when a special permit's required versus when a project may continue by right, as well as existing non-conforming uses, and whether they're allowed to expand or not.
We have a lot of that.
Both of
in the
those,
city.
yeah.
And the reason why there is like a need to review alteration of existing structures is because there's a requirement called substantial improvement, where if you put over a 12-month period, if you do renovations to the house that equal or exceed 50% of the structure's value, that's considered a substantial improvement. So not, the land and the structure, just the structure itself. So if you have a $200,000 valued structure and you put in $100,000 worth of work into it over 12 months, you have to bring that house up to current flood code. So if that were to happen to a house within the floodplain after July 1st of this year, they would be required to fill in their basement to grade and then elevate the first floor 2 feet above the base flood elevation.
Oh my.
Just as an example for residential structures. So that's why, that's why reviewing alterations of existing structures is important, so that you can track to make sure people aren't exceeding that, and try to let people know when they're proposing work that would trip that, because then you're required by building code to make those changes.
Very good.
And then for recreational vehicles as well, I just had a question on how the 180 days required to comply with any elevation and anchoring existing within the floodplain districts. I'm just curious how we're going to monitor to make sure that's adhered to. Is there?
Yeah,
I know it's a hard.
I don't know that you do,
Yeah.
or you put that.
I just thought it.
I mean, that would go probably onto the building department, and,
Yeah.
I can't speak for them, but I'm sure it's not high on their list of things to do.
It's just something I have to ask.
Yep.
So I think the plan was to suspend this public meeting until the next meeting for a decision.
But this is
Eric
not-
and I will work on some updates that we both think could
Just a
be
wording.
made.
Just a wording, is you just updating some wording?
Yeah, like we said, the clarification on special
Yeah,
permits
to review that.
versus proceeding by right.
I guess that maybe that's a good conversation to have now, though. Does it make sense for a planning board to be special permit reviewer? I mean, I could see it for a new structure in the floodplain maybe, but not for
Yeah, that's a great question.
So you asking we should just vote on it tonight, is that what you're thinking?
Well, no, it's because it's not, there are a couple minor changes we could still make in its current form, based on some things that Eric had brought up that I think are important. I think the question is the current ordinance makes the planning board the special permit granting authority for these. I agree, in some cases it makes sense. If someone has a property, they have a vacant lot in the floodplain, they want to build a house, okay, so maybe it makes sense that special permit goes through the planning board. But on on minor alterations or other things, there's even a question, should it be a special permit? And that's a great point you raised. And in Eric's experience, some communities just have a general permit that's not a special permit. It's a floodplain permit or whatever you want to call it, just so that you can review and track projects and applications for any work that's going on in the floodplain. And I think our ordinance is somewhat outdated in those terms and could probably stand updating to clarify who's reviewing what. And I mean, we can make it anything you want.
So you're probably alluding it could be the Conservation Commission, or it could be maybe the zoning, well, not so much the zoning, but conservation or the planning board,
Building department.
Or building department.
or the building.
I mean, the requirement from the NFIP's perspective is just that it gets a permit generally. It doesn't have to be from one board or another, so I guess it's kind of up to the individual municipality to figure that part out.
So we're saying if it's a general building permit for a renovation or addition or something, then at least there's a form of record.
Right, and that would cover what the NFIP requires for a permit, so it just needs to have something.
There's a lot of stuff in town built without permits.
Yeah. Well,
I mean, there is, from both sides, it makes sense to keep everything in one place.
Yeah.
So I think the important thing is at the moment we get our ordinance up to compliance, and maybe it does make sense to revisit it down the road. I mean, when was the last time you saw a special permit come through for work in the floodplain district? I mean, they don't happen. Doesn't mean we shouldn't have a strong ordinance for when they do, but I don't think it hasn't been a hot issue in the past. I haven't seen any.
so maybe for the sake of these revisions, just trying to keep it simple and get it across by the deadline.
Yes.
We could try to modify that as little as possible and just clean up language that clarifies differences between.
That makes sense.
Simple, clean it up, yeah. That's
Yeah, I think so. Maybe just for the sake of time
Yeah.
in making sure we're,
July.
Yeah.
we meet that July deadline.
That makes sense, yes. Okay, well,
Make a motion to continue this on the agenda.
we
Then
make a motion
next
to
meeting,
continue this
present any.
public hearing on the floodplain.
So one comment, Mr. Chairman, this is not a public meeting on this, right? This was under new business.
Or new business, well,
Okay.
So it'll just be
it's a
continued to.
discussion,
It'll
continue
just be continued to next. meeting.
continue the discussion at the next meeting
I think you have to have a
with the
hearing on it,
zoning
don't you?
ordinance.
So you have to advertise it and repost it anyway, right? For the
Yeah.
next meeting.
So maybe
So-
you need to
sorry.
schedule the public hearing at the next meeting.
Then yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
Thank you.
We're all learning as we go.
So I guess you need a motion then to move this to a public hearing, then.
So a motion
Is that
to,
correct?
move the discussions, no public hearing.
Yeah.
Move the discussion till next meeting
but there is a public hearing, I think, right?
As a public hearing,
to have a public hearing,
the 13th.
On the 13th.
to have a public hearing on the zoning ordinance for floodplain management.
Okay.
You concur with the motion?
I concur with the motion, however, before we start,
Okay,
I won't be here on the 13th next month. So whether or not we want to move dates around one week or the other, I won't be available.
That might be better to do.
Well, he should be, Eric's all set, right?
Yeah, I just got sworn in today.
Yeah, so he's, so we have
So
a
you got,
quorum.
yeah, you got a quorum with three, yeah.
We'll have a quorum.
I'll be able to make it on the 13th unless I fall drastically ill between now and then.
That's good.
I'm all set to,
If there's any issues, then we'll just do what we did tonight with the historical zoning.
I am all set to move it on the
Do you
13th.
want- do you want a motion?
One way or the other, don't make a
Yeah.
difference to me,
The following week.
I think.
I'll make it. Then I'll make a motion on the floor that we continue the updates to the floodplain overlay with a public hearing on the next meeting, on the regular meeting of the planning board, 13th.
I second, yes.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Passes. I just wanna, my phone's still screwed up.
Make a motion, we adjourn, I guess, is that,
You wanna make it? Sure.
I'm sorry,
Paul made a motion to adjourn.
I'll second that.
okay.
All in favor? Aye. Passed.
Rob, thanks for, you got Walt this time.